Christians have been at the forefront of art, science, literature, government forever. Why are we losing the culture war? Why is the Christian cult of culture so bad? I'm Adam Elliott Davis. This is Fistful of Nails. Today I want to talk about how the church has sold its birthright, how it's forsaken the opportunities to really be a powerhouse, a powerful beacon in the dark in pursuit of financial gain. Now, this isn't a condemnation of the church per se. It's an indictment. It's also not a condemnation of financial gain. I think that commerce is healthy, and I'm a capitalist, and I think God is a capitalist. He invests. So I'm going to take this back to Genesis. This isn't going to be all preaching, but I really want to frame this correctly. When God created the universe, he did so out of his imagination. When God created man in his own image, he created man to reflect him and to demonstrate similar, lesser qualities of himself. So if God is a creator who is creative and makes things from his imagination, then man is by default creative and a creator and makes things out of his imagination. And if the church is to reflect their God honestly and wholeheartedly, which I don't know if I can think of a more wholehearted pursuit, a worthier pursuit, than to try to do what your daddy does in creation. That is, I think, when you think about God, you think about his abilities, his powers, like you think about him like a superhero, what can he do? What are his powers? Well, he's creative. He can create. I haven't looked up the etymology of the word creative, but it's one who can create or does create. So creator God creates man. Man creates art. Because man can't create earth, man creates art. Man creates worlds in his imagination. Man tells stories, man paints pictures. When I say man, just know woman too. So creator man creates art, and creator man who talks to daddy, who talks to creator God and is close with creator God and really sees what creator God does firsthand and understands it as the God creator's handiwork, becomes inspired and strives to accomplish. If you have kids, you know what this looks like. You draw a picture for your child and they color on it, and it sucks. But it's beautiful, My daughter is almost gonna be 5 in a few months, and she's getting better every day. It's amazing. It's incredible. Now, when she started drawing, it was doodles, it was scribbles, it was pretty colors that didn't make any sense, but it was creative. She was striving, she was aspiring, not only to be creative, but to be impressive. She wanted her parents to see what she made. And we've loved every painting and drawing that she's come up with. And likewise, humans, adults, the church, when we see a tree, or we see a mountain, or we see a beautiful person, or we see maybe a sad situation or something like that, we can kind of detect and this isn't a power, it's ingrained in human perception. It's ingrained. That's why stories are so powerful. We have this thing called empathy that allows us to imagine the reality of that person as though it were our own. We can live vicariously through that moment. And so when we create, we catch this spark of life, this spirit of creativity, this spirit of a deeper truth. I think that's what art and story is ultimately. It's a mining process. We're digging in to something below the surface and attempting to discover a greater fundamental truth about ourselves, about humanity, the universe, animals, whatever the case may be, shapes, if you're an abstract painter, colors, like the depths of creativity are limitless. So over the last, I don't know, maybe this has always been a problem, but over the last, I'm going to say 50 years, just because I think the 60s, 70s probably is when the real Christian faith-based media movement sort of began in earnest. I mean, there's always been the Christian theme in music and movies and stuff, especially movies. Hollywood was majorly faithful and conservative for decades up until the 70s, 60s, 70s. Around the 60s, 70s, 80s, faith-based things started to kind of take a turn where people realized there was a lot of money to be made there, a lot of profit to be had. And people outside of the faith began getting involved. That's not, it's not a bad thing. But if you're, let's say hypothetically, you're just a guy, just a dude walking down the street, and you see someone building a really big, nice, beautiful house. And you think, wow, that's a really nice, big, beautiful house. And you have no construction experience, but you'd like your name on that house. So you go up to the house and you start like just hanging boards places, and you start, sawing stuff. And your work, it looks kind of like the house, like it's a mostly 90-degree angle, but it doesn't have the same level of practice and the standard of security and safety and workmanship that the professionals have. That house is going to fall apart. That house is going to suck. That's where we find ourselves now in Christian culture. And it's so pervasive, and I don't love that word for this, but it's true. And it's so ubiquitous that anywhere you look and find a faith-based thing, you're going to find maybe one or two gems of true, powerful Christian content. And then you're going to find 50 that are just bland and mundane and vacant, spiritually void, and feel kind of dead. I think spiritual deadness is the common theme among the faith-based genre of various industries as a whole. The ubiquity of faith-based anything, and faith-based, I'm so sick of the words faith-based, that's pervasive. Nothing should be faith-based. Michelangelo, when he painted on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, wasn't like, look at this faith-based painting. He painted something that was beautiful to him, that was inspiring to him. It happened to be in a chapel, so it happened to need to be about the Lord and the heavens and turn into this miracle of creativity. But he wasn't a faith-based painter. He was a painter who understood faith. When I tell people I make movies, I really don't like to say I'm a faith-based filmmaker, because I'm not. My goal as a filmmaker is not to convert the audience. It's to tell a good story. And if they want to know why I told a good story or know how I told a good story, they can look at me. They can find out what I'm about. And if they look at me, I better be good. I better be walking the way I would want to be seen walking. I was almost going to say I better be walking according to the gospel. And I should be. Everybody should be. But that creates a legalism around it that is unsustainable. So instead of saying I should be walking like Christ perfectly, which I should be, I should say I should be walking how I'm comfortable being seen walking. Because if I'm honest with myself and I'm trying to put on perfection as a costume, it's going to be false, and it's not going to be meaningful to anybody. They're going to look at me and say, oh, that guy's dorky, and who cares, right? But that guy is putting on an act to try to get business, to try to trick the Christians into thinking he's okay. And there's that kind of falls in line with the deadness of the cult of Christian content. And it's everywhere, and people are obsessed with it, and they're not obsessed because it's spiritually uplifting and spiritually sound and like full of good gospel messaging, but because it's safe and it's harmless and their kids can listen to it and not be corrupted, which is all good stuff. None of that's bad. Christians should strive to make things that do not hurt children. That should be like one of our very first tenets of our output. But there are a lot of people who aren't children in the world, and there are a lot of people who don't have and never will have children or don't like children or whatever. When we've gravitated to this assembly line Christianity in culture, in media, in entertainment, it creates this frame for Christian thought and creativity that is destructive to the church. Not only internally, not only does it weaken the people who profess faith, but it also discourages people outside of faith from investigating further. I don't know the stats on people who have looked at church as an option and then heard a Christian song on the radio and thought, this is really bad. But I'm sure it's high. Some of it's pretty good, but a lot of it is so new agey. And that's something that can be a whole episode all by itself, and it will be at some point. But when Christian music is more concerned with telling everybody that you're enough than it is with saying you're a broken, damned person until God rescued you from your sin, that's a problem. That's a fundamental defect in the messaging of faith-based content, because it's not true. If anything says I'm enough, or by my own thoughts and power I can be saved, or whatever, anything like that demotes God to a position of rubber stamping your faith because you did certain check boxes, that's not it. That's just not it. And yeah, I watched this movie a while ago with Dean Cain. I don't remember what it was called. It was about they lost their kid in the woods near their house, and there was a lake. And you can kind of guess what the intrigue was. Maybe he went into the lake and died. He didn't. He walked up a hill on the other side of the lake. It was fine. And they found him, and it was literally like not even. It was like within eye line of the house. You could see where the kid disappeared. And I'm not just saying it was a bad movie, though it was, but there was no message in it aside from nothing bad happens to Christians. And that sucks, man. I mean, as a person who is a Christian and a passionate Christian, bad things happen almost constantly. I would say it is the base state, the resting state of a Christian is dealing with the byproduct of the world being fallen and myself being fallen. It's our default state. That is our flesh. It says so in the Bible. Our flesh is our core structure. Only after we're saved does that begin to remove from the equation. And it doesn't say that now that you're Christian, nothing bad is going to happen to you, which is what faith-based films love to tell you. Or that there's no ultimate consequences. It might be uncomfortable, but ultimately you're going to find that kid and he's going to be right over there. That's not a real message. And they, in the movie they prayed about it, and the police and a couple of neighbors came or something. It's been a long time, but the ultimate outcome was that they prayed and did all this stuff, and it turns out he was fine. That's a very elementary understanding of the faith walk and of a relationship with Christ. Maybe it really happened. I don't know. But the result as an audience member is the kid was fine the whole time. You didn't need to freak out. You didn't need to panic. You certainly didn't need to make a bad movie about it. You should have just looked a little harder, or maybe taught your kid not to wander off, especially if you live right next to a lake. That's just bad parenting. So it muddies the message. It breaks it down to non-right conclusions and creates a situation where people will take away the wrong thing Not because they want to, although they do. We all fundamentally want to take away the wrong thing, but because that's the most obvious message. And so this cult of Christian content, the cult of culture, it's trapped audiences, it's trapped filmmakers and songwriters and novelists and business leaders and things into this thing where they only have to meet a certain measure of surface level faithfulness. And the outcome, the broad global outcome, is that people who are not believers see it, and they see the through the veil. They see the thin veneer of faith that is, and they say that's nothing. That's shallow. You don't believe that. You're putting it on to impress people. You're putting it on to buy your way into heaven. Ananias and Sapphira brought a portion of their money. They sold some property. They brought a portion of it to the church, and they kept back some for themselves. And they said, "This is all we got. We're giving you everything." Peter or Paul, I think, called him out and said, "That's not everything." He knew spiritually. He had a divine revelation that they were lying. They were putting on the costume, and that they had not, in fact, given everything. And they might have given away. They might have contributed, illustratively, $990,000 from their estate and kept $10, and it still wouldn't have been everything, because they said it was everything. And when you promise something to the Lord, and this is something we all need to hear and learn, right? I need to hear it and learn it. When you promise something to the Lord, you better make sure you deliver that promise. You can't trick the Lord into accepting your gift if you're holding some back. He sees you. He knows what you've given. But if I've intended in my heart to give 10% of all of my income to the church and say that I gave 10%, but I only gave 9, then I've lied to the Lord. The church doesn't know, but the Lord knows. I think the Lord knows your heart, and I think that's the core answer. Ananias and Sapphira, they were killed. The Lord struck them dead because they withheld from the Lord, not because they withheld from the Lord, but because in so doing, they tried to make themselves appear as though they had not withheld from the Lord. And they tried to make themselves appear to be holy and righteously serving the Lord's purposes. And that's what Christian music is. That's what Christian movies are. That's what a lot of Christian books are. And again, this is not comprehensive. There's a lot of good artists out there who are Christians, who are making Christian stuff, or stuff from a Christian perspective. When I tell people I'm a Christian filmmaker, I say I make secular, friendly, and that's another issue we can talk about later, but I make movies for all audiences, for the general public, from a Christian worldview or Christian perspective. All that means to me, whether it means the same to you, it doesn't matter to me, honestly, because what it means to me, and I know I'm being honest and having integrity in that declaration of my mission, is that I'm making content that aligns with my understanding of the gospel and with Christ, that the public can consume without feeling like they're being preached to or castigated or judged by consuming it. And so when Ananias and Sapphira did that, the Lord judged them right then and there, because they were being dishonest, they were being deceptive, and they were being wolves in sheep's clothing. The veneer of their religiosity was removed, and the Lord killed them. And we should be trembling that the Lord has not stricken down every single faith-based filmmaker who's not a Christian, or every single faith-based filmmaker or musician who is a Christian, but maybe all they're doing is assembling the right ingredients to make a profitable song, a hit song on Christian radio. I think that there are literal factories where people are assembling the right pieces for the sake of the marketplace rather than telling the real, spiritually derived, discerned message that the Lord has placed on their hearts. That's the cult of Christian culture. I think it is going to collapse. I think it needs to collapse. I think it is ripe for judgment. And that scares the crap out of me. And I'm going to do a part 2 on this where we talk about what we can do to fix it. I'm Adam Elliott Davis. This is Fistful of Nails. Peace.